Reading with your kids.
Hola, niho, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni wanji, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jed Lee, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so very honored that you join us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher Radio, wherever you find your podcast. Join us right now from the beautiful state of Oregon. Our guest is here today to celebrate her very important book. It's called Wanna Hug? Consent and Boundaries for Kids. Please welcome to the show author and licensed certified counselor, Christine Babinek. Hey, Christine, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me today.
Thanks so much for having for being with us. Wanna Hug is a book that's been put out from our friends over at Familius Publishing. Can you tell us a little bit about the book, who we're going to meet, and what we're going to be talking about?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, thank you. It did come out last October, and I'm super excited to say that it actually just won a Children's Book Council Children's Favorite Book Award, which I think for talking about this kind of material and this kind of book, a lot of adults or grown-ups think, oh, this is an educational book. This is a book that, we're going to be learning something here. But I specifically wrote this book in a child-centered and child-focused way, and for kids. So the fact that kids are the ones that picked it and like it and enjoy it that just makes my heart really happy and really full. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah. Well, that is quite an accomplishment, and congratulations on that. So this idea of Wanna Hug and consent and boundaries for kids, what are we going to be, are we going to experience a story here or a series of different scenarios that families can talk about?
Yeah. So, I think the way that I wrote this is in a very naturalistic, non-sexual but body-based interactions that many kids have throughout their day. So wrestling with a brother and sister, sharing toys, books, games, inventing games on the playground. Really, like I said, very naturalistic, very scenarios that kids would have in their everyday life all day long, and things that adults would see all day long. And so really what we're doing is we're introducing two big words, right? Consent and boundaries. But we're also decoupling and expanding the definitions of those two things. So we're seeing how do we respect and honor people in terms of physical health, or maybe cultural traditions, or neurodiversity, or disabilities, or just plain personal preferences. And so really teaching kids that opening a dialogue and asking questions and getting curious is the way that we can create safety and the most appropriate sort of version of consent and boundaries. And so for me, I think consent and boundaries are the foundations of all healthy relationships.
Yeah. So you mentioned different cultures. I know here in my family, my beautiful wife's family is originally from Puerto Rico, and that culture is very different in many ways than the Irish American culture that I grew up in.
Yeah.
And it's much more physically affectionate, and
Yes.
And one of the things that my kids heard growing up is when they met people, their Spanish relatives and their Spanish friends, is like, oh, you give everybody a kiss in the cheek. And how do we kind of balance? I don't know if balance is the right word, but how do we balance it? It's like, well, there are a lot of kids out there that aren't comfortable with giving people a kiss on the cheek, but you also don't want to offend, and we want our kids to be able to fit in. And so what's a family to do?
I think this is one of the most important questions. Anyone that I've talked to about this book, they'll give me the, I'm a hugger. What do? I want to be respectful, but I'm a hugger. And I say, that's great. This book and these messages is not in any way about stopping physical love and affection at all. It's merely about creating safety around that. And what I mean by that is not getting quite fussed, but sure, sharing cultural things that happen in different places and spaces, but also giving kids the message that they are never, ever, ever going to get in trouble if they don't give love and affection in a physical way, and really helping them know that they don't owe physical affection to anyone, especially a grown-up. That grown-ups can roll with the flow, and you can say, hey, and giving them other options too. So that's a part of this book. It's not just about saying no. In fact, I think that's a very tired and old-fashioned and frankly victim-blaming way of approaching this topic. But when we arm the grown-ups in the room, right? If we see an eager loved one coming over and about to descend and cuddle our kids, and we know that we're trying to establish, them knowing that they are in control of their body, we might intervene and say, in our house, we're teaching our kids to ask before giving a hug or a kiss, will you support us in this? Will you ask first? And see if they're in the mood. And if they're not in the mood, or they're feeling a certain way, they may offer you other options. So they may say, Grandma, I don't want to give a kiss. Is it okay if we just do a fist bump? Or will you come and read this book with me instead? I think a lot of times what we see is grown-ups trying to, again, in a really loving and affectionate way, cheer up kids by giving them a little cuddle or a little, a tickle or something like that. But what we know from kids, from the mouths of babes, is that is unhelpful when a kid is not in a great mood. Mm-hmm. They don't like it. And it's impeding on their own ability to self-regulate. And we want to help kids learn how to self-regulate.
One of the things that somebody who listens to this podcast on a regular basis understands is that my mind is a little bit weird, and it goes off in different tangents and directions, and I get these memories and flashes. And as you were speaking about a grandmother coming over and wanting to give a kid a hug and cuddle or whatever, and the kid just thinking, nah, this isn't what I want to do at the moment. I've spent 35 plus years doing educational magic shows, and for a good part, especially early on of those 35 years, I was doing it in whiteface. So I had that traditional clown makeup where, the face was white and the eyes were whatever. And that freaked out a lot of kids. Yes. And so we did some different things to, on stage, but whatnot. But I was really comfortable. I became very comfortable sitting down and saying, when I saw a kid who was freaking out, just sitting back and saying, oh, and being able to stay back and say, hey, can I come closer? Would you like to shake hands? How are you? And any time a parent would go over and push the kid, give the clown. I'm like, no, stop that.
This is why people fear clowns.
Yes. Well, yeah. I mean, you bring up a good point, and I recognize that this is something I was doing for a living, and so I had experience with it. And instead of like the grandparent, the one time the grandparent sees a kid in a year, I'm doing this every day, and there may be one or two kids at every school that feels this way. So I had lots of experience, and I also had a background in counseling and human services. So, but how can we help? What you were saying is, hey, we teach our kids to do this, but I'm just picturing a lot of grandparents out there, because I'm of the age of a grandparent. I'm almost 100. a lot of my peers thinking back and going, "What's wrong with me? Do I smile? I didn't take a shower, and I'm not good enough for you to come over and give me a hug."
Right.
How do we help our, after we say those words about we're trying to empower our kids that a lot of us don't hear? How can we help our grandparents and aunts and uncles feel okay and know that it's not them, it's the kid, and this is actually a healthy thing?
I think getting in touch with how much our grandparents, aunts, and uncles love and want to protect the kids is probably the way in. So even talking with them about, this isn't about you. Of course, Jane and Johnny love you. And we want them to be able to come to you and say, Grandma, something happened at school, and, someone pushed me on the playground, and it really hurt and I didn't like it. And, be a safe place in that kid's life where they can talk about, the things that have happened to them they're again, my book is it's not a therapy book. It is a general audience book. So it's about just the everyday natural things that happen in kids' life. And kids aren't going to come to grandma, auntie, and uncle if they don't have the safety there. If they can't say no there, if they can't express themselves in that relationship, then so I think the easiest thing to talk to elders about is, this is a way that we're building trust with our kids. We're laying the foundation here for them to have more complicated or, more important conversations later. And so we're just trying to create that safety and trust. And we want you to be a part of that. We want them to always know they can go to you, that you're always going to listen and not insist on something for yourself. And I think any grandparent, aunt, and uncle, when we talk to them and we say, you are the most important people in this kid's life, right? Families are very typically the most important. And, we want to foster the healthiest and closest and strongest bonds here. So for us, this means doing this. This is how we want to build trust. This is what our family culture is like. Will you join us in that? And then it's not. Also, I think talking to grown-ups about a child's need is more important than a grown-up's need. Mm-hmm. Most grown-ups can get their head around that pretty quick.
You would hope so.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned that this isn't a therapy book and that it's not a quote-unquote educational book. It's a fun book for families to read together. What was it that inspired? It would make sense. Oh, a counselor's going to write a therapy book. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But you're saying that this isn't a therapy book. So where in your busy day in life did the inspiration come to write this?
Yeah, great question. So I, because a lot of people in the community know I'm a therapist, I get asked a lot of questions. And most of the folks know that my specialty is trauma, and I do work with a lot of sexual abuse survivors. That is my main clientele, and I've done that for, over 20 years. But I had a parent come to me and say, hey, Chris, I have a kid who has a really hard time keeping their hands to themselves, and it's getting them in a lot of trouble. And so do you have any resources or books that might address that isn't, don't be who you are and you're a bad kid, but is just really calling attention to, starting to develop a sense of empathy, starting to develop communication, and listening to other people, not just getting what I want. And this is a task, that we want kids to kind of go through anyway, whether or not they have a particularly difficult time keeping their hands to themselves. This is a developmental task that we literally ask kids to ask before petting a dog on the street. But we never teach them, if you're going to want to wrestle or play a game with your friends, you should ask first what they're comfortable with. Mm-hmm. So we're teaching kids to pay attention to animals and not other people, which I thought, wow, this is crazy. So anyway, I got asked this question, and this was 2015, by the way. And I said, gosh, I honestly don't know. I'm a therapist. I'm used to working in the treatment, not prevention category. So, I went to the office and asked every colleague I knew and put it out on a listserv that has about 7,000 counselors on it. And no one knew of any books. And not joking, wrote the book over my lunch. It literally came pouring out of me, and it came out in rhyme. So I want everyone to know that this is a rhyming book. It's a fun book. It's a happy book. And a lot of kids will be able to point to little scenarios that they see and go, oh, that's happened to me. I know that one. And, I wrote it. I ended up self-publishing it, and then a publisher picked it up, and it's been 7-8 long years to get it to a larger market. And there's a lot of great books out now about consent and boundaries, but mine is probably, for that 4 to 8 year old category where they're really starting to learn to not just get what I want, but also look out and develop empathy and start communicating in a different way and start asking really good questions.
Yeah. How can we, this thought just occurred to me. You were talking about that kid who loves to wrestle and is a big hugger. And how do we help those kids and probably some adults in our lives who have that feeling, understand and have empathy for a person who may be on the autism spectrum who has real sensory issues? Yes. And it's like, I love hugging people. It gives me such a great feeling. What do you mean that it hurts that person to hug? What does it mean? What do you mean when I put my hand on their shoulder, that might hurt them? I don't understand that. That doesn't compute.
Yeah. So in the book, we're not just saying, don't do this, don't do that. In my book, we're cueing kids to start asking questions like, may I? Can I? Would you like to? And more importantly, I think getting to the point that you're talking about, we're asking them to look at their face, look at what's going on with their body. Does it look like they're having fun? Starting to develop, not just getting what I want, because, I think for those of us who are adults thinking about things, we know that coercion, persuasion, these are not consent, right? So just continuing to ask, which if we stopped at telling kids, please ask before you do X, Y, or Z, we're going to get into a lot of trouble here, because kids will just ask and ask and ask until they get the answer they want. So that's why I think, again, to your point, we're helping them look up, look outward, see what's happening, see if someone looks and feels comfortable. And so not just in the moment, but also just in general. Right. And so, I think for specific populations, anyone on the autism spectrum, even just personal preference, right? Even just shy kids or kids who come from families who are not big huggers. It really, like, the principle just applies to anyone. And we're just developing a sense of respect, curiosity, and empathy. Yeah. Right. So those are the things that we're looking to develop through this book. And like I said, it's in a fun way, and we're arming them with ways to do that, right? Asking questions.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, going back to what I was mentioning earlier about me working as a clown and coming in and needing to be able to read the room and to kind of look out into an audience of 100, 500 kids, and you can see the kids that are uncomfortable. And, I'm out and I'm inviting kids to be up on stage with me, and there are ways I can see from the stage that there are certain kids that may be raising their hands because everybody else is, but they don't want to come up on stage.
Yeah,
and you can just tell that. And I think and that's a skill that I kind of developed, and part of it was, I think it was I was born with it, and I kind of developed it. I love the idea that we're talking to kids about developing these kind of skills and looking and trying to read the people that we're interacting with, because I think it's I think it really helps with all of our human interactions.
That's it. I mean, it's basic social emotional learning, right? And we're doing that in a lot of ways. I mean, certainly teachers are doing that in the classroom. Absolutely 100%, right? When you have to manage, like you did as a clown, probably hundreds of kids, and then teachers are managing 30, 35 kids in a room. They're constantly working on developing that social emotional, intelligence. And yeah, this book here falls under, just normal developmental tasks that we hope kids will be learning: social emotional learning, impulse control, frustration tolerance, respect. It falls into a lot of different categories, which is great. And like I said, if I had probably sat down and tried to figure out how to do this, I probably would have failed epically. The fact that I think it was the culmination of, I've been doing treatment for so long, and this prevention piece came out, and I thought, this is great, because if we can help kids learn these tasks in fun and loving ways, not just telling them who and how to be, but offering choices, offering, hey, these are the ways you can develop the skill, then I think we're going to have more success.
Yeah. This might be crazy. It might just be my very weird kind of mind, but here you are. You've written this book that is encouraging kids to listen to the different social cues that are being given in our everyday interactions. And I am here looking at you through the magic of Zoom, looking at you in your space, and behind you there are these two prints featuring a couple of dozen different boom boxes. Is this idea that we're teaching kids to listen, in your love of these old devices that we listen to, is there a connection there, or did you just like the art and decided to put it up?
This might be the greatest question I've been ever asked in my entire lifetime. I love it so much. I think there is a connection. I think there is. I think that a lot of us are receiving a lot of input every day now in a way that, you and I didn't grow up with. Kids are inundated with taking stuff in, and so much so that we've lost the thread of the melody, right? We've lost that human to human connection. Now it just seems a lot like information and not turning in and tuning into the person that's in front of you or the people that are in front of you. So I don't know, but I do, of course, love music, but I love being with people, listening to music too, right? Going to concerts, talking about the songs, how they make us feel and make us want to dance. And anytime that you see people who feel comfortable and safe with each other, that flow that happens in dancing or in being with one another, you feel it viscerally, even if you're watching it. And so, yeah, I think creating a safer, healthier, human tuning kind of world would be amazing, right?
Yeah, very, very cool. I love that. I love I asked that question. That was a great answer.
I do too. Always ask that question.
Hey, Christine, where can we go to find out more about Wanna Hug, Consent and Boundaries for Kids, and also find out about more about you and about the different services that you're offering?
For sure. The book is available everywhere. Of course, I'm going to encourage you to check out the Familias website. They believed in the book, and they believe in the message, and they believe in child-centered books, things that are fun for kids, that are lyrical and rhythmic, and not just do this, don't do that. And so I really appreciate that about them. Such a wonderful publishing company. But certainly you can get it at any local bookstore or Amazon or what have you. If you go to the Familias website, you can certainly find information about me there. And I have a website as well. Although I do like to say I'm not accepting any new clients at this time, in case people are wondering. But yeah, that I am certainly on the web as well.
Awesome. We've had a really great time speaking to the author of Wanna Hug, Consent and Boundaries for Kids. Our guest has been Christine Babinek. Hey, Christine, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. It's such a joy, and I really appreciate all your thoughtful questions.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast and will join us for the next exciting episode. If you want to make sure you don't miss a second of the show, please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, wherever you get your podcasts. And also be sure to visit readingwithyourkids.com and download your copy of the Reading With Your Kids online magazine. It's free. It's available at readingwithyourkids.com. Just click on our blog. Before we go, I want to make sure that I give a big thank you to my team: Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Madison Dairies, Soji Franklin, Monica Rivera Sosa, Ann O'Leary. I want to give a big thank you to my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me, and most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.